Hey there, welcome to another episode. Wow, just finished a great conversation with Amber Romaniuk of Amber Approved. What a story. Wow, I think you're going to be shocked and astounded as I was to hear her journey, man, and what she went through, and also just so impressed with who she is and especially where she's come from, and her braveness of not only going through that time, but also being that living example, having been through that time and now is really helping people make it through. A lot talked about emotions, the relationship to food, and how it's actually sometimes not even about the food. So I know you're going to find a lot of insight from this conversation. We really dive deep, and this is truly about your relationship to your food, to yourself, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, physically. A lot of gems and a lot of depth. So we really dive deep in this, and I know you're going to learn lots and you're going to enjoy it. So thanks for watching. All right, welcome. Today on the show I have Amber Romaniuk of Amber Approved. Super excited and wonderful to have you on, Amber.
Hi, Malcolm. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be on, so thank you.
Cool, right on. So those watching or listening, as you know, the idea, the concept, the theme of the show is we have an expert on and we just ask them about their journey, their relationship to food, where they started, where they're at now, everything in between. And it's just a very natural, organic conversation, and we just let the wisdom kind of arise and the conversation flow from there. So without further ado, let's just dive right into it. So Amber, I know folks are familiar with you, especially if they're in town. They've hopefully maybe been to one of your Amber approved Stampede breakfasts, or they've maybe heard you online. You've got a fantastic podcast. You're just out there. I mean, I know in 2015 you were actually named top social media blogger in Calgary. So it's cool. You're making waves and definitely have a presence out in Calgary.
Thank you. It just, the more I can share and help people and spread the message, I mean, that's what this is all about. So it's been great to have the opportunity to create a community and connect with all sorts of like-minded, businesses and the people that need the support and the help.
Yeah, you have a really powerful story that really is helping people. I think a lot can relate to it, and even for myself, like I didn't go through obviously the same journey as you, but I can relate to some of the similarities and some of the emotions and things and patterns and habits that you went through. So let's start there. Let's talk about you and your story and your journey, and then we'll just let it kind of unfold and continue from there.
Sure. So actually about 8 years ago is when everything kind of just fell apart. When I was growing up, I always had kind of an unconscious relationship with food. There was always lots of treats and things available, and I kind of just ate whatever whenever I wanted. And I think it was when I actually moved to Calgary and went to college and started first off getting all sorts of digestive issues and had no idea what was contributing to it. No one could help me with that. And then I was very resistant to cut out things like sugar because I was so addicted to them and didn't see how doing something like that at that point could help me. And then, yeah, about 8 years ago, I went through a situation where I my heart was broken and I literally couldn't eat. I was so upset, and then I was like, oh, I want to like look perfect. I want the perfect body. Then everything will just be so perfect. And so I literally, between really not being able to eat and restricting calories and exercising like 2 hours a day, yeah, I got to my perfect body that I thought, life would just be so great. And it wasn't. And restricting was hard. Maintaining that body was difficult. And then one day I went to a party and there was an ice cream cake and I had a little bit, and it was just like this switch flipped in my head, and this person, that I had lost the weight for didn't want to be with me. So I just had this mentality shift of, well, if they don't want to be with me and this is too hard, like, screw it all, I'm just going to eat. And so within about a period of about 4 months, I'd say I gained about 60 pounds. So I was at the biggest that I had ever been in my entire life, and I just literally lost all control around food. I isolated myself. I obviously lost any confidence that I had. I didn't want to go out and be social. A lot of my friends I didn't even want to see because I didn't want them to notice, obviously, that I had gained weight, because it had always been something that since I was young, the older boys or people may comment here and there, and it really, really impacted me. I didn't realize how much it did until I started going through this journey. So for a year, it was like major suffering. I would spend my days off just like going and buying food and sitting on the couch and just numbing myself, eating and watching TV to try and, fill this void that was totally a void of a lack of self-love and connection. And it was really the lowest point for me was when I had finished a binge, and I actually have some videos on my website that show how much I used to eat. Like, it was substantial amounts of food and a lot of sweet things and bread-like things. But I was finishing a binge, and usually what I would do is throw it all in the garbage just so I would, not eat anymore. And I was laying on the couch in complete pain. It just felt like my insides were going to explode. And then about an hour later, I was like, oh, I have a bit of room. I could, have another cookie or something. And so I dug through the garbage to eat the food, and I just sat on the floor and started to cry. And I was just like so embarrassed, so ashamed, so scared, because I was like, if I keep doing this, I could cause some sort of health issues that could be very serious, and I could end up dying. Like, I'm isolated, I'm alone. I don't want to be alone. I don't want to feel this way. So it just kind of, I guess, was what I needed, kind of a wake-up call that this was not meant to be my life. So after that, I really was like, I don't know how I'm going to overcome this or what the journey looks like, but I am going to fight through, and I'm going to figure it out. So I started to try to limit my binges to once a week, and tried to just get like a little bit active. And it started to work, and I started to lose the weight, but as I went through, I had such a weight roller coaster. I mean, from, the age of 21 to the age of like 28, which is where I really just stopped keeping track, but I probably lost and gained over 1,000 pounds.
Wow.
In just that period of time. Probably from when I was 14, when I started dieting, to 18 is probably like another, few hundred. But it was such vast ups and downs that obviously also put a lot of stress on my body. And every time I would lose the weight, obviously because I hadn't dealt with any of the emotional stuff, because I didn't know about that at the time, I'd have all these fears and just weird feelings that it wasn't going to last and I was going to gain it back again. And of course, which happened. So every few months I was up 30, down 30, up 20, down 20. And then I started doing a lot of reading and research about sugar and the addictive qualities of it, and wheat and how it affects our brain chemistry, and the bloating it can contribute to, and started reading more about the digestive system and candida and all these different physical things that I was suffering from. And it really blew my mind to really see what an impact food could have on my physical body, my mood, and just every area of my life. And so the more that I learned and kind of used myself as a guinea pig, the more I was starting to shift. So as I started reading about the sugar and the wheat and really recognizing and kind of, going with, I think I'm sensitive to wheat. I've got all these symptoms. I think I'm sensitive to dairy. And of course, I had no control around sugar. And usually all three of those things were in all the things I was eating. So I tried to eliminate sugar, dairy, and wheat, which took me probably a few dozen tries. But I thought eliminating those things would actually end the binging and end the food addiction. But of course, it did not. It helped, but there was still this major pull that if the situation didn't go the way I wanted to, or I had multiple stressors happen, that I wanted to numb myself. So I'd still be eating like a big bag of cashews or like a whole jar of peanut butter and like 10 bananas. So that's when I really discovered, okay, there's so much more here than just, these foods pulling me in. There's a major emotional connection. This unknown of how do I love myself? How do I take care of myself? I never was taught that, and it's nobody's fault, but it just was something that was massively missing for me, and being kind and gentle with my body. So then I embarked largely on the like emotional, more spiritual, connecting with myself, and luckily had the privilege of working with a very talented medical intuitive at the time. So thankful our paths aligned, and she was able to start helping me how to understand that what I was doing to my body wasn't obviously just, because these foods were addictive. There was a lot of emotional stuff going on for me. And then after I had worked with her a bit, and then just kind of again going and reading all these books like Louise L. Hay and all these different things, and starting to learn like, wow, if I have so many triggers or stressors, or I'm around certain people, it really pulls me into want to eat. Or if I've been broken up with, or like a relationship hasn't gone well, like I want to fill that void. I want to gain the weight again and put this protection back on so that I can't get hurt. And kind of, I'm just sitting in this unhappy place. So the more that I started to change the way that I ate, started balancing my digestive system and doing the emotional work. So learning how to take care of myself, getting enough sleep, drinking enough water, not going to the gym and being my own drill sergeant and just pushing myself to my limits. All of it through I'd say about a 2 or 3 year period of time, really I feel led me to a discovery of, this is what it feels like to take care of myself. This is what it feels like to love myself. And people ask, well, what does that feel like? And I always say, well, probably different for everybody, but I literally get butterflies when I think about myself and connection with self. And it's a beautiful feeling. And it's just like, it just makes me really happy. And, when we do the work and we go on that path of discovery, we at some point will just kind of, I feel like, have a moment to really realize, wow, I am in connection with myself. And so, yeah, that inspired me as people around me were asking me questions, wanting my advice. And I thought, if I suffered the way that I did and overcame what I did, how many other people, men and women, especially women, are suffering with body image issues, eating disorders of all different kinds, whether much more mild than mine or much more severe. How many people are suffering with digestive issues, are addicted to sugar and don't realize it, and everything in between. So that's what inspired me to want to start my business and become a holistic nutritionist and really niche into this area, because just like you've had your own journey, you can really relate and understand what those people are going through because you've been there yourself. And I feel like that's such a big piece of what really helps me to help other people, because I just understand. So that's kind of what led me from, the beginning of it all to now.
Wow, what a journey! what a roller coaster ride! And yeah, and good for you for that persistence through it. I mean, it's just shocking to hear, like you say, in that short period of time, over 1,000 pounds up, down, and I can't imagine the emotional roller coaster. We've all been there. We've all had our kind of dark night of the soul, as it were, and these tests and these challenges, and it's the real strength of character of who do you become out of that, right? Life does have problems. We're going to have our challenges, and how do we keep going? And yes. I love that you did, and you're now there as a light and a resource for anyone else, because it's your situation is unique, but it's not uncommon, right? And yes. I'm sure you've seen that.
Oh, exactly. And my biggest goal is to share my story and to let people know you're not the only one. It's okay to open up and share your story with those that you feel safe and comfortable with, and to get help and the support that you need to overcome it, because you don't have to keep suffering and you don't have to do it alone. And to let people know that, it's so fulfilling, because then maybe someone has the courage to open up. And the more I started sharing about my story, even as I was just starting my business, like my parents didn't know, my closest friends and family didn't know, so I actually wrote my story out because I knew I'd have to share it on my website. And I sent it to all of them first, and they all responded with, like, I had no idea, like, you should have talked to me about this. And then some of them started to share their own stories of struggle that I never would have imagined, like people that I never would have guessed, right? So it was also kind of a bit of a relief to be like, oh, I'm not the only one either, and everyone still loves and accepts me exactly as I am, and there wasn't any judgment, which, of course, was a big fear for me at first. So, yeah.
My biggest takeaway hearing what you're talking about and sharing your journey is that it wasn't, it was so much more than just food, and it was so much more than just physical. Like you said, there was that emotional aspect, there was the spiritual aspect, that love and that self-worth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is a very interesting thing. Before I went through this journey, I did not know anything about intuition, nor really obviously have any belief in it. And as I started to learn how to connect with myself, I discovered what a sensitive being I was, not just to energy, but to just food in general. And I'd go and be in a big crowd of people and have no idea why afterward I'd be drained and triggered to want to binge and so overwhelmed because I was taking on all these people's energies and didn't know how to protect myself. And I really noticed again if there were certain people I was spending time with that maybe they were secretly like energy suckers or whatever it was, and I had no idea again about any of this. So I would get home and be so overwhelmed and just be like, I need to eat. So upon discovering this sensitivity and that I do have a really strong intuition, once I was able to get over the fear of all of that and surrender to like, this is who I am and this is a beautiful part of me and it's a gift, that really helped again to eliminate a trigger and turn a fear into like a trust. And this is, it's safe to be intuitive, it's safe to celebrate this part of me and to actually use it to stay grounded and stay connected with myself. And I find the interesting thing is a lot of people I work with are fighting with this exact same thing, and are also very sensitive beings. And that's one of the reasons why they get so overwhelmed and triggered so easily, because they are empaths. They're taking on other people's stuff and they have no idea what to do. So that's definitely a big piece. And I feel like with this overall picture, whilst obviously a lot of people are choosing food as the method for sabotage or numbing or whatever they're choosing to use it for, it is so much more than the physical. Like if someone's got a schedule that's overwhelming and overbooked and they're not getting enough time for themselves to unwind, they're not getting enough sleep, maybe they're like overactive or, pushing their bodies too hard. Maybe they're putting themselves in multiple stressful situations and maybe they don't even realize it. But I see that, and people who are the yes ma'am kind of people who are saying yes to everything and everybody, they're afraid to say no, they're afraid to take their lunch break even and things like that. Those are the first places where I'll usually now start working with people, because if your life is literally chaos, the physical body and the balancing of the physical body and the mental will not happen until we have grounding, we feel safe, we build confidence, we build that connection with ourselves. So I always share with people, I could create the best, menu for you, and we could totally do the protocols to balance your physical body, but nothing is really going to stick there until we build the connection with you and we set boundaries, we learn how to say no and not overextend ourselves, because it leaves people ungrounded and overwhelmed. And then what do we want to do? We want to get home, and our unwinding is eating or drinking a bottle of wine and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So it's very fascinating how it is really every area of our life, externally and internally, that can contribute to this kind of sabotage. It fascinates me. The more I get into business, it's just like, wow, it's so complex.
Yeah.
But the beauty is when we shift and work on these different areas, that's where people will see the long-lasting success and not go back into it, because they have the tools and the understanding of, this is what needs to be aligned and this is what I need to do for myself to ensure that this is something I recover from and never have to deal with again.
Yeah, amazing. And what's coming for me is this thought that oftentimes those of us that are no doubt there's a huge physical component and piece to like the food part of who we are and to be healthy. But I've often noticed, myself included, for those of us that are like so focused on food. I mean, for me, it was almost like, tunnel vision, right? It's like, okay, if I could only just improve my diet a little bit more, if I could do this. And at some point it actually becomes not about the food at all. It's like, your diet is amazing. You're doing so good, like and I'm a big believer in now of like an 80-20, being that flexitarian,
Yes.
and having that balance. And oftentimes, just if someone's listening, if you're one of those people that's just so focused on food, you're probably just rocking it, doing so good, and that there's other areas that need to kind of come into focus and come into balance, for that quote unquote perfect health or more balance in your life. And it's not as much about the food anymore.
Yeah, and I can totally relate to that too, because I had times where my eating was just like so bang on, so perfect, that tunnel vision, like I'd take food with me everywhere. I didn't really care to eat out because I didn't know what was in the food, or going to people's houses. I'd always take my own because I was just like, I can't, have anything else because I don't want to gain weight. I don't want to get a stomach ache. But again, the problem with that was it was the rigidity of perfection, right? And that's not realistic. And that 80-20 is so beautiful. And we're human beings, we deserve to indulge and enjoy things that are outside of our regular eating. And when we are in that balance, having some indulgence here and there will not, throw us way off track and will not, make us sick. I think it's important to have that. And if, that's what someone's focus is right now, I do a lot of work with people who have, gone into restrictive eating styles or tried different diets, or maybe they've seen success with a certain eating style, but now all of a sudden they're afraid to eat, fats or carbs or other things outside of what they've known that's helped them in this short period of time. And I'm helping them build confidence around these foods they now fear or are feeling a bit uncertain about. And I think it's so important to build food courage with people, and to also, bodies are always shifting and changing. Like what worked for me 6 months ago when my hormones were a little bit off, it's different now because everything's just, beautifully aligned. And I always tell people, like, it's going to change. So to be open to learning to listen to our body and give our bodies, what we're wanting as we learn that, because some days, I'm like looking and I'm, having not very much protein and I'm just eating tons of plants and fruits and like, oatmeals and things. And then the next day I'm like, I just want, all fats and proteins. And the more you learn how to build that relationship with yourself, the more you really, figure that out. I always get people asking me, well, what's the best way for me to eat? And I'm like, honestly, first knowing your current state of health and your behavior and your life, that's the number one. And, then that's going to probably change down the road as we work together, as you do whatever you're doing. So yeah, I can totally relate to what you're saying. And it's beautiful to be in a space now where you can just kind of, go with the flow, let take the wheel and just kind of not be so focused on, I have to do it like this. There's no allowance for anything else, which I think, again, is so healthy to be in flow with our health and our eating.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's why I have this phrase, like, recreate relationship to food. Even if you're, you and I were at where we're at, feeling really good and comfortable, and just know it's always going to change. That relationship is always changing, and you're recreating it every day. And I love what you said about, being an intuitive and empath, and, that applies to food as well. Just feeling into the moment, feeling into your body. As sentient beings, I think that's how we primarily navigate through the world of food and nutrition. We say, what do I feel like eating, right? It's like, it's a feeling, it's an intuition versus, well, I think I should eat, right? It's usually when we get stuck in the head and the mind that it's like, okay, intellectually, I think I should do this. And, I do want to preface that there could always be a time and a place. I imagine for you in your journey, there was a time and a place, like you said, okay, wheat, dairy, sugar, there's a time and a place that I got to be really strict, and, you're getting that outside guidance, someone who's maybe done some testing or it's an extension of your own intuition and using science and such to help you on your path. Okay, for this period of time, here's what we're going to do to kind of get you back in balance. And then the ultimate goal is to move forward with that freedom and that intuition.
Exactly. And that's what I always tell people. If they know they're suffering and that sugar is a trigger, or whatever foods for them are triggers, for some people it's the salty chips and stuff, we're not going to be able to usually right away just be like, oh, I can just have a little bit and it's okay. That's where sometimes we do have to eliminate those foods to help ourselves to build that relationship and not have this massive temptation around. But then the goal is always, let's get you to that beautiful place where you don't feel fear or triggered if you have that once in a while. And that, you really start to talk to your body. Like when I work with people, and I notice this myself, a healthy, balanced body really doesn't crave anything at all, especially processed foods. I might crave like a nice piece of dark chocolate once in a while, or a juicy big steak, or like a big salad just rammed full of every color of the rainbow of vegetables. But I won't, crave like a fast food or a donut or anything to me that just doesn't even really look like food. Whereas before, my sugar cravings were so debilitating that I would literally sit at work all day and obsess about what I was going to go to the store and buy. So it's a completely different spectrum. And once we can start to work on calming down both the cravings from the physical, so things like, being tired and adrenal fatigue and yeast and those kinds of things, And the emotional cravings, because I'm a big believer in that too, and I talk about that all the time. Once we can calm those down and people can eliminate the cravings, that really allows us to open up to learn how to listen to our bodies and give them what they want versus, having, that mental craving stuck in your head, or your lack of confidence in, really knowing what to choose as far as how to nourish your body properly. So it's so fascinating. And the more we work on clearing out the kind of, I like to call it the fog of LA, because it gets so thick and you don't know where you're at when you're stuck in it. When we can get out of the LA fog and up into the blue sky, it's like your intuition, it explodes and your energy explodes, and all of a sudden you just have a much closer connection to your body and know what to give yourself, because you can listen more easily because there's not all this fog and stuff floating around that's distracting you, right? So it definitely, I see that all the time with people, and it's so cool when they kind of have those moments where they're like, I'm not craving anything anymore, and I feel like I know what I should give my body now, and it's such great things to celebrate when people.
No, yeah, great analogy, and with that, that fog. I know you've heard of like the idea of the gut grain. I almost said butt grain connection. Yeah, there is a butt grain connection.
Yes.
Your gut and your brain connection, and that idea of the fog. You can be in a mental fog because your gut's in a fog, and typically you had mentioned yeast, and that can be a big culprit. It said that we're more bacteria than we are human cells. And, we hold so much bacteria that helps with our digestion, helps with our immune system. And as well, the latest research is how that affects our mind and our emotions and our clear thinking. Yeah, and if we're overrun with yeast, which can even show up with like mucus in the stool, bloating, indigestion, all that kind of stuff, like there's a cloud, there's a fog, and you could be releasing fogs into the air.
My goodness, yes, it's true. And when I suffered, I had the worst candida or yeast that had ever been seen at the clinic I was going to at the time. And it didn't surprise me with having to take antibiotics growing up, eating lots of sugar and things like that, especially when I was deep in my food addiction. And I could not remember anything to save my life. I had no energy. My brain fog was awful. It didn't matter what I ate. I was getting bloated. And it was like and the cravings again. The yeast was fueling the sugar and the bread cravings. And so I went on a journey to tackle the yeast, and it took a few years because at the time I didn't realize or learn that if you have candida but you have a food addiction, to go on such a restrictive way of eating is going to just keep triggering me. And so it did keep triggering me. So once I more overcame the food addiction side and felt more confident that I could, kill the yeast and maybe do it in a bit more mild way, and it was okay if it took a bit longer, then it worked. And then I really, came out of the fog, and I was like, what? I have energy and I can be energetic all day. I have no energy lulls. My memory's great. Like, I'm not bloated anymore. It just blew my mind how much that was also mentally and physically playing with me. And yeah, the mood swings, and just overall in the body, like I found I had really bad adrenal fatigue and pretty much every hormone imbalance that you could get. And the better I was able to eliminate the yeast, of course, the more my cortisol levels regulated as well. So I'll often see in people that I work with, they'll be suffering with either some, level of adrenal fatigue and the yeast and the cravings and the sabotage of food. So there's a lot of connections that I'll see, but that when we can work on balancing that piece, obviously it's a lot more easy to maintain. Even if we have to do it again, it's a lot easier, and I find we're not having as many symptoms if we do need to do it again. But yeah, it totally fascinated me how yeast works and how it can be, everywhere in your body, really. It's not just necessarily sitting in the large intestine. And yeah, the symptoms are, believable that most people have it. A lot of people don't even realize they do. So it's something that I love to talk about and explore with people because it completely changes your state of health when you're able to balance it, which is so cool.
Yeah, get a lot of people who are listening excited. I mean, hearing those symptoms, it's so common, right? The indigestion, the bloating, the low energy, hormone imbalance, and that manifests in all different kinds of ways. The poor memory, the unclear thinking, lots of stuff going on. So you're saying that you kind of pick one at a time in terms of okay, let's address this area. And as you do, I'm sure all the other areas begin to improve, but you're kind of choosing one at a time.
Exactly. So the most important thing, if someone has some sort of emotional connection to their food, whether they're an emotional eater, they have a binge eating issue or a full-blown food addiction, whatever that looks like, it's so important that we deal with that first, again, because I find you cannot restrict somebody, and again, from my own learnings, you cannot restrict somebody who already is having this up and down with their relationship with food and is feeling overwhelmed. It's very important to first deal with that and have that feeling like it's really, gone, and then really exploring, okay, what is the safest course of action for this person? I don't believe in restricting people. I don't believe in counting calories or putting people on diets. So it's really taking a mindful approach to any protocol, whether it's to deal with yeast, to deal with adrenal fatigue, to deal with the underactive thyroid or food sensitivities, because we want to treat the body gently. And again, especially dealing with people who are sensitive, intuitive, you've got to be very gentle with the body, because some of these protocols that can seem more invasive or be more invasive can completely unground a person and overwhelm them and cause things that they wouldn't imagine would happen because they're sensitive, and that could trigger them to go back into eating. And it often did for me before I knew anything about the intuitive side of me. And again, after looking back, it was like, wow, no wonder I was so overwhelmed and triggered all of a sudden, because I was doing something too invasive to my body, and she was just reacting in the way that she was. And that's why I think it's so important to teach people awareness of their body and how to learn to listen to their bodies, because when we can learn how to listen and listen to our bodies talking to us, which are the symptoms, whether it's the headache, the bloating, the pain, the craving, the overwhelm and the stress, or, the people who are, chronically hopping on the scale and they're not happy with the number they're seeing, so they're inflamed and puffy and they're just in such fight with their bodies. When we can learn how to listen, and when we get a symptom, instead of reacting with being angry and like, oh, I'm bloated again, and that frustration, that immediately turns our body into being like, oh my gosh, I'm rejecting myself, inflammation, immune system, everything. Now we're in that restrictive fight or flight mode. If we can go from that to I'm noticing I have some stomach pain, or I'm noticing I'm really fatigued today, or, I'm having some cravings. Let me reflect back on this day and on my week and what happened. What did I eat? Have I had enough self-care time? Sleep? Who was I interacting with? What exactly was going on that maybe could have contributed to these symptoms? To get someone to this point is beautiful, because then we're no longer in fight with ourselves. We're not going to trigger ourselves or want to punish ourselves with food because we're not, feeling optimal right now. We're instead practicing being kind, gentle, and mindful with ourselves. And this is what truly will help to build that connection and get us to optimal health. And for those who are trying to lose weight, to help lose weight. Because if we're always in fight, we're having all these symptoms, we're in our head going, I have to eat like this, I have to exercise like this, we're not in connection. We're in fight, and it's very rigid, and the body will want to stay in protection mode. The body will want to hang on to weight, or plateau, or again, the inflammation or tension that happens. So building that kindness and gentleness is so huge and so powerful, because when we do that, we are in connection and we are honoring and giving our bodies what they want and need. And then the body feels safe to heal, to balance, to let go of excess weight, whatever it is that's going on. But we've got to be open to building connection, because otherwise we will just keep fighting with our bodies.
Yeah, I love what you're saying there, and just knowing and trusting that your body is, like you say, it's doing the best with what it's been given and its circumstances, and knowing and trusting the body is self-healing, self-repairing, self-regenerating, and it's always going to be moving towards that in the best way that it can, and loving and accepting that is a huge part of that. And the other thing I picked up on what you're saying is, someone might be listening going, okay, it's great that Amber and Malcolm are intuitive and da da da, but I'm not intuitive. But actually, that's how you build your intuition. The intuition actually starts with the most basic of those signs and signals. That's how the body communicates. And we haven't learned that is the language of the body, and that's how the body communicates. And that's the beginnings of intuition. It's like, oh, okay, indigestion, or my stomach feels a certain way. Like, that's a communication, a pain, a sign, a symptom. Yeah. And it's beginning to learn those signs and signals, and listening, trusting, accepting, and that's the journey.
Yeah, and practicing this regularly. I find the other thing that's very powerful as well is the mind. So if someone is in a mindset of, I'm never going to lose weight, or I'm always going to have health issues, my body can't heal, and it's that very limiting. And I used to be there, and guess what happened? Every time I thought that, something else happened. And then I had proved to myself, see, something's just going to always happen. And I was so ingrained in believing it. So as I started to again shift my health and my belief system, I was, telling myself, like, and using positive affirmations, and bringing in other techniques to shift my mentality to say my body's always healing. I trust my body's ability to heal. My body is where she is, but I'm going to do what I can. And some days I might mess up, and that's okay. I'm going to then, forgive myself and move on and not hang on to it. But again, I think it's so big to just take a piece of paper and write down, what do you think about your body and what do you think about your health? And are you open that your body could heal one day, or are you not? Because most people will have a yes or no answer. And if you're undecided, then I'd say it's probably more along the lines of a no. Mm-hmm. So then what do we have to do to help you to start catching yourself when you're thinking, those limiting beliefs, and start shifting it? Because that in itself will help also the body to balance and to heal. And for those who, are just learning, that's what I would recommend to start with. And for those who are like deep into their journey and noticing there's things that are continuing to happen, even though they are really committed and in great practices with themselves, this is where there may be stuff going on in our subconscious that we have no clue what it is. And maybe there's some, different modalities and techniques that we may want to learn about or see an expert about that can help to pull this stuff out so that we can work on releasing that. I mean, I even still do stuff like that. And something that's come up for me and that I'm working on right now, just so people can relate, is I had a subconscious belief so deep in my brain that was, I always have to fight with my body. Well, hey, that's a big one, right? Especially for history. And I'm sure you've probably explored and discovered different things like that as well. But to pull something like that out and get rid of it, well, that also helps me to have a deeper connection with my body and my health, because I no longer have this thought going around that I'm not aware of that's actually sabotaging me still. So I think stuff like that is so powerful too, because again, if we're looking at bacteria in our cells, I'm a big believer that they're responding to every thought we have. So it's negative or positive. Negative, that bacteria or whatever the cell is going to, get really weak, versus the positive, which is going to heal, regenerate, grow, and that bacteria is not going to grow where we don't want it to. So again, your immune system operates better, you're in a better mindset, your moods are better, everything is just more balanced and optimal. So I've been fascinated with, that's the journey I've been on for the past 2 years, is really digging into my subconscious and getting out that which doesn't serve me from when I was a child up until now. And it's so powerful. So I think there's always more to learn. And the more we learn, the more we can build that deeper connection. And for me, especially, the more I can help my clients and help, my following and the people around me to discover other ways that they can support themselves or get to the optimal health or break the vicious cycle with the food addiction or the emotional eating, because it's just building that deeper connection and learning more. And that's the beauty of health and food and connection with body, is you'll never have one day where you're like, well, I've learned it all. I'm done now. There's nothing else, right? There's always going to be more discovery. And that's the beauty of life. there's always a journey. There's always more things to learn. And if we can view it from a place of like curiosity and like, oh, well, yeah, this happened. Like, I wonder why, versus the anger and the frustration. And I know as we shift, it changes to more curiosity, but the more we can be lighter about it, the easier it will be to work through, to see the learnings, and then take all of that forward with you as you continue on in your journey, whatever your journey is.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it reminds me of the concept of yoga. I used to be really into yoga, not so much the asanas, of which most people associate with yoga, but the idea of, in that bigger concept, it means union, right? And you can choose these different paths to find that union. So, like, the Hare Krishnas would do it through, like, love and devotion and singing, so that's called, like, bhakti yoga, as well as, the asana yoga, which is the more kind of, like, postural. And then there's the meditation, this and that. And food, in one sense, is just one path to self-discovery, right? It's something that you and I, and probably a lot of people listening to, have chosen to really explore to its depths to help discover who we are. And like you've really clearly demonstrated, as we go deeper into that rabbit hole, obviously it's not just about food. There's so much self-discovery, self-relationship, and yeah, I love what you're saying about really down to that self-love too, right? I mean, I think science is proving it more and more that we can speak to ourselves, we can speak to the bacteria, and there's a response. And to me, it's obvious, just in the same that if you as a being, as an individual, receive positive feedback, it's like, oh wow, it's just, wow, my day's brighter, I got a smile. But if someone's like, like you suck, like negative words, you just kind of shrink back, and you are a collection of bacteria and cells, right? So those bacteria and cells react just the same as you as an entire being react, and so it's a big part of that relationship. And so another thing I was thinking of too, and I'd love to kind of get your feedback, is I've been thinking about this as a way to kind of, I used to, again, similar patterns with food, like overeating or binging or whatever. Like, there's often that tendency of like, and even for a lot of us that are into this, like, health food, of like, this is good, this is bad, I can eat this, I can't eat that. If there was something that was like, quote unquote bad, like I shouldn't eat, but there was a craving or a binge, it would be just like to do it as quickly as possible, forget about it. And so, I'm thinking a strategy, and I've tested it out, and I'd love to hear if you think this is a good one too, is okay, as much as possible, remove those labels. I was at a seminar with Stephen Herod Buhner, who's an amazing, fantastic herbalist, very wise man, and he said in decades of teaching workshops, the most controversial thing he has ever said, that brings up the most like fight and chatter and this and that, he said, there is no bad food. There is no bad food. And immediately my mind was like, well, what about this? What about that? Right? And we put those labels on, and, coming back to that intuition. So what if, it's hard to get rid of those labels, good and bad. So what if, in that kind of moment of binging or eating that food that is bad, I had the sense of, okay, can we slow down? Can we really actually truly appreciate and enjoy it? Just like, okay, this food is going to be good in this moment, maybe because it's the only thing you have, or it's because what you're sharing with family, the moment matters, or for some reason, your body's calling for this thing. I mean, I used to be a vegetarian, and meat was bad, but my body used to crave it. There was a physiological, like, a need and a desire, but mentally I was like, oh no. But if I just slowed down and go, okay, I'm going to get rid of the label, however I came up with that, I'm just going to be in this moment, fully take it in and appreciate it, and let my body, like, tell me, like, how does it actually feel to consume this? What is the result like? And maybe for the steak, could be awesome. Maybe for the donut, I get halfway through and I can actually stop and catch myself and go, wait a minute, okay, I'm trying to enjoy these bites. I find myself in this moment because of this craving. But if you really slow down versus, stuff it in and then feel the after effects, if you can, take it in, maybe you'll stop yourself halfway through.
Yeah, I really love what you're saying, and I heard that before too, and my first reaction was there's good food and there's bad food, right? And then it's like, no, actually, the more you get into it, and I share this with people, I say, if you are stressed or you're in a negative state when you eat a carrot, you could get a stomach ache from eating that carrot. If you tell your body, oh, this isn't good for me, even though it's a carrot, you could still get that pain, right? Whereas if you see this is a carrot, I'm going to take this in, I'm relaxed, I'm going to enjoy it, I'm going to chew it slowly, or whatever food for that matter, we're going to probably take it in and digest it in, and, it's going to be a lot easier. Same with the processed foods. And I even found this too. If I was binging and I was going really fast, oh man, and I was like so guilty and angry, yeah, I was in pain, I was suffering. But if I had a time where I was like, you know what, I'm gonna give myself permission. I'm going to have, this donut or whatever it is, and I slowed down and chewed it. Yes, oftentimes I wouldn't want it all. And then the other part was I was noticing I wasn't getting as bloated. I wasn't, because I was giving myself permission, I wasn't having the guilt and the anger and all the negative emotions that came along with it. And we know if we're in a negative state, our digestion shuts down. So anything we put in it's going to be stressful, and it might cause those symptoms versus if we're open. So I think that it definitely has a lot to do with that. And again, coming from the mental state, if you've told yourself for years at a time that these foods are bad, well, your body is going to freak out when you put them inside of you because it's a threat. It's recognizing it as a threat because you told yourself this, and now it's ingrained. So I think another big piece is learning how to unravel that and say it's safe to nourish my body. I'm going to be, mindful about what I choose. And if I choose, the donut sometimes, and if I choose the steak, even though I'm a vegetarian, well, yeah, I'm listening to my body, and I'm going to trust and let this be a positive experience versus the negative, and be a great learning experience. So if I eat the donut and I get a stomach ache, okay, well, then maybe it's just for me. I recognize if I choose to have something like this, I may experience a symptom. So maybe I want a digestive enzyme available, or I'm going to take extra good care of myself so that I don't suffer longer, right? Like, there's always a more mild and gentle way to approach it, like you said. And we want to get rid of those rigid beliefs that, like, this is bad, because it will prove to us when we ingest it that it is bad. So I like what you're saying, and I think that that's a great approach and place to get to. I can fully relate to that because I'm Ukrainian, and at Christmas we like to have homemade pierogies, and they're full of gluten and dairy. And, the first time I chose to have the courage to try them after I was recovering from my food addiction, I just said, you'll be fine. You've been taking such care of yourself. It's safe for you to have this sometimes. And I ate them and had no reaction. And it kind of actually blew me away. And I was like, what? I don't have a stomach ache? All these symptoms are happening? And then I was like, oh, yeah, this is what it's about, to give yourself permission and not stress about it, and just be human and enjoy it sometimes. So we can build that, again, confidence and courage, and get rid of that rigidity. It's something that, again, takes an open mind and takes practice, but it's so great when you get there.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Cool. So for anyone listening, how can they continue to, get to know you, follow you maybe on social media? I know you've got an online magazine. Does it go into print too, or is it just online?
It's fully online. I find for sustainability reasons, and it's super expensive to print magazines. Plus, then that way I can share it with the world. We have readers all over the world, so it is fantastic. So yeah, I have the Amber Food magazine, so that's a great resource that can be found on my website. I have a podcast in which I talk about more topics like this, and really going inside about the relationship with food and how we're treating our bodies. It's called the No Sugarcoating Podcast. Again, amberapproved.ca on my homepage, all that information is available. And if anyone can fully relate to what we're talking about and really is resonating and wanting more support, again, they can go to amberapproved.ca, and you can message me, shoot me an email, or you can, book in, and we can just have a conversation of where you're at and what you're needing support with. Because as I always tell people, we can always choose to start learning and changing today. We just want to get the stuff out of the way so we can transform. So it's so fun to create all the content and help people to shift, just like with what you're doing. So it's so great to connect and, speak the language together and help inspire other people.
Yeah, for sure. Well, good. I hope those watching have found some value. I'm sure if you're at this point in the interview, I'm sure you have and you've enjoyed it. Really encourage you to go to amberapproved.ca, find her on Facebook, find her on Instagram, social media, whatever channels you're on. Amber is there for you. And yeah, wonderful. I love that your magazine is online. That makes it accessible for everyone around the world. And if you're in Calgary, you're lucky enough, hopefully you can make it to one of her Amber approved Stampede breakfasts. She has a cookbook, and yeah, again, the world of the internet, you can connect with her online, you can get a consult, so if that's something that you're interested in. So thanks a lot for being on. What a great conversation. It was lots of fun, and yeah, I look forward to connecting again soon.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It's so great that you're doing this. I love what you're sharing.